Hi, it's me Jacqueline. Welcome to my channel. If you're new to the channel, then please subscribe my channel and visit my Patreon page, link in the description. Exploring the house more fully in the light of day, I began to appreciate its size and the care of its layout. The main part of 3 stories stretched across the front in an east-west line with the front to the north, but 2 wings of 2 stories extended from the main part to enclose the courtyard garden, and this was in turn flanked by the swimming pool and patio. The view from the side of the house was down an extended valley and overlooked a panorama of considerable beauty. The rooms in the main building looked over this vista, with a long gallery extending across the front or north side overlooking the approach to the house. The views from the side were less spectacular but still beautiful. A portico supported by pillars and pilasters covered the front door and provided protection from the weather. To the east and west sides of the house there extended a series of gardens and vegetable growing areas, including an extensive glasshouse and nursery and some formal gardens. Beyond a high wall to the west side lay a heavily wooded area, the tops of the trees cutting off the view of the land beyond. The rooms in each of the wings looked outward across the landscape, and a corridor linked to the long gallery served to give access. Aside from the main staircase, there were 3 other staircases, a second hidden stair in the main part, and one at the extremity of each of the wings. I would later discover that there were extensive cellars below the house, and the roof had large attics used for storage in the main, but having other functions as well. My exploration, having started early, ended when I found myself in the long gallery as my aunt emerged from her room and greeted me with a warm smile. "Good morning," she smiled. "Couldn't sleep? Or just an early riser?" "No," I grinned. "I slept pretty well, thanks, but I was hungry and thought I could get some breakfast." "Did you?" she asked. "No, I started to explore instead." I laughed, "And now I really am hungry." "Good, then we can eat together," she responded, leading the way down to the dining room. "Find anything interesting in your travels?" "No, I mean yes." I laughed. "I didn't guess how big the house is when you showed me around last night." "It's huge," I continued, "and the gardens seem to be enormous, more like a park." "It is," she replied seriously. "Everything for a mile to our south and for a half-mile on the remaining 3 sides belongs to the house. It cannot be sold or used for any other development. The house will not permit it. Outside of that there are farmlands. Those are leased to tenants, and we get some produce and income from them. The main income for this place comes from some very old trusts and investments which pay for the upkeep." She smiled as we seated ourselves, adding as an afterthought, "We are pretty much isolated here, but then, that's what our original builders wanted." Breakfast was a much lighter affair than supper had been. Only Karen appeared, and then only to bring freshly cooked eggs and bacon, toast, and coffee to the table. I ate my fill and listened as Aunt talked about the history of the house and its various occupants, or custodians, as she called them. I also learned that the present rather gothic appearance was due to an extension to the main building in the late 1860s, the original appearance having been a little less dramatic. Once more I was struck by the fact that the house seemed to have only had women in residence and remarked on this. Aunt laughed and again said that there had been men too, but that the house changed them, as it needed to. I didn't understand this, but she would not explain further, saying only that I would eventually understand. Breakfast over, Aunt gave me a guided tour of the 2 wings and the rooms they housed. "Here I found guest rooms, a small flat, perhaps yours in a few years," my aunt remarked, "linen stores and a study, the housekeeper's office and several more rooms which seemed to have no definitive use, being just rooms which could be adapted as needed." We also saw a small part of the attic in the west side roof and the cellar below the main house. By the end of the tour the day had begun to warm up uncomfortably, and Aunt suggested that I take a swim and explore the gardens while she caught up with some work on a book she was writing, a history of witchcraft in our part of the country. She also suggested that I should try to find Charlene the gardener and introduce myself to her and, if possible, to her partner Michelle, who I now learned was an artist. In my room once more, I quickly changed into swimming briefs, resisting the temptation to wear a girl's one-piece, slipped on some shorts and a loose shirt, grabbed a towel and some canvas shoes, and made for the pool. As I swam, I had the feeling the house was watching me, but could see no one at the windows or anywhere in the courtyard. Eventually, tiring of my own company, I got out, dried myself, and went in search of the gardener. "Hello," said a voice from the depths of a large shrub. "You must be Phil. We heard you were coming. Hang on a minute, and I'll get out of this." The voice, a pleasant alto, broke off, and the plant shook as the person began to extricate themselves. A violent convulsion followed, and a smiling figure emerged in denim dungarees and a tight t-shirt, a shock of light brown hair crowning her head and heavy work boots on her feet. In her hand she held a pair of hedge clippers, and she brushed her hand on her jeans as she advanced on me and held it out. "Hi, I'm Charlie, the gardener." "Charlene, really, but I prefer to keep it to Charlie. Sorry we missed you last night, but we had to do a bit of work down in the long meadow and it kept us until too late." "Hi," I greeted this rather unusual woman. "I'm Phil. You must have a lot of work to do to keep this nice like this." "Yes," she laughed, "but we have help too." "Come on, Michelle will never forgive me if I don't take you to meet her immediately. She wanted to come up first thing this morning, but when we got up there you had already eaten and were off exploring." Chatting gaily, she led me off on a tour of the shrubbery until we found a sheltered corner where a rather stunning woman in a halter top and tight shorts, sandals, and a wide-brimmed sun hat was painting in watercolor. "Mitch," called Charlie, "look who's come exploring." "Meet Phil," she added as the woman turned to see us and smiled warmly. "Hi, Phil. Nice to meet you. Sorry we missed you last night," she added, "settling in okay?" "Yeah," I grinned. "I like your painting." I finished looking at the picture on the small easel. It was a very good representation of the small corner of the garden in which we stood. The detail she had managed to pack into it was stunning, and I said so, adding that I wished I could paint as well as she so obviously could. Our conversation drifted into the technique of drawing and painting, and I rather brashly told her that I was considered to be one of the more promising artists in my group at school. While we talked, she continued her painting, and Charlie soon drifted away to continue her work. Eventually, Michelle finished and suggested that she do a sketch of me in this corner of the garden for my aunt. Slightly embarrassed by the suggestion, I agreed and found myself being posed seated and staring off into the distance for the sketch. This took less time than I would have thought possible, and I was surprised to see the almost photographic detail in her pencil sketch of me. Naturally, the background was not as detailed, but it was still impressive. "Sit still a bit longer. I want to do another for a painting later." She laughed when I commented on the drawing. "Anybody ever told you that you have a very artistic look to you? I think you could just be a model for me in a number of things I have in mind. Could you teach me to draw like that?" I asked rather shyly, fascinated by the speed and detail of her work. "Be a pleasure," she replied. "Shall I talk to your aunt about a regular session for us?" During the days which followed, I swam, began to learn to ride under the tuition of my aunt and the lady in charge of the stables, a Nordic blonde of statuesque build named Olga, and sat for Michelle. I discovered statues, fountains, and ornamental lakes in the vast grounds around the house, all immaculate, all in beautiful harmony with the surroundings. Yet, apart from Charlie and Michelle, Olga and her stable hands, all women, and Karen and Colleen, I met no one else and puzzled over who and how the gardens and grounds were kept as beautiful as this without dozens of helpers. Charlene would not give a direct answer, nor would anyone else. "There is plenty of help around, and they all pitch in and do their bit for the house," was the usual reply, followed by, "Once you've been here a while, you'll get to know them." This was followed by the discovery, by accident, that the house stood at the exact center of a huge pentagram, its 5 points marked by huge stone candles. Aunt was a lot more forthcoming about that, saying simply that the house was a very magical place which needed protection. She then explained that, being built at a major junction of ley lines, the house was a focus for magic and many supernatural things. The house, she explained, straddled several dimensions, and only the extremely potent spells which had created the house and its environs held it stable. When I expressed doubt about the reality of magic, she smiled gently and asked me to walk with her. Leading me to an alcove below the pool terrace, she led me into a tunnel and then into a grotto. Here she told me to stand in a certain place and murmured a short incantation, gesturing as she did so. I gasped in surprise as the water in the fountain in this underground room suddenly flowed upwards from the pool and then took on shape and form, becoming a stunningly beautiful woman no bigger than I was, who glowed blue-white and was stark naked as she walked toward me, her skin translucent and her eyes a deep violet. "Greetings, mistress of change," she said to my aunt with a small bow in a voice that called to mind the murmur of a stream over gravel banks, and then, turning to me, she bowed and said, "And welcome to you, mistress-to-be." "Seraphina, Lady of the Water Sprites," my aunt replied, "I have called you forth to explain to my nephew the magic of this place. Philip, the Lady Seraphina lives here in this grotto, and you may ask her help and guidance as you learn your role in the future of the house and its people." "I sense that you do not yet understand this place, mistress-to-be," said the sprite. "Perhaps you will learn best by looking at your inner self and understanding that the house exists to provide a refuge and must itself be protected. You are that protector-to-be." She paused and then, with a glance at my aunt, said, "The mistress of change must become a woman. She cannot be born woman. You are the chosen one. Are you content to be chosen?" "I don't understand," I stammered. "I am a boy, not a girl. How can I be mistress? How can I become a woman?" "The chosen one changes. It is natural in this place. We are the servants of change, not its mistresses. That is your place when you have made the transition. We do your bidding in keeping this place safe from harm and from the threat of those who would destroy us." The sprite gave me a sad smile, so much responsibility for one so young to have placed upon them. "Go now. We are here when you need us and our magic is here for your use when it is needed." With that, she dissolved again into the pool and the water resumed its natural flow. Discussing the encounter later with Aunt Selena, I came back to the question of the sprite's mention of my changing gender. Gently, she told me that this process would take some time and that I would not find it difficult. Then she smiled and added, "Do you remember what the Lady of the Fountain said? The mistress of change must become a woman. She cannot be born a woman?" I nodded, yes, but... I stopped as light dawned, then blurted out, "You mean you were a boy too?" "Yes. Like you, I was born a boy. My given name then was Selwyn. Then I came here and the changes began. Now no one, not even my brother, your father, remembers Selwyn. As far as he is concerned, and everyone else for that matter, I was always Selena." "You mean," I said, and then had to search for the right words, "that something changes in people's heads so they think you were always a girl?" "That about sums it up," grinned Aunt Selena. "Let me ask you something. Have you chosen to wear anything from the girls' clothing that you have found in the closets and drawers in your room?" "Yes," I said, blushing. I don't know why, but somehow I wanted to. "Then you made the choice?" she asked. "I guess so," I replied. "Why do you ask?" "Because that's how it worked for all the mistress of change. We have all come here as boys and chosen to wear girls' clothes before becoming women." She grinned at me and went on, "If you must know, I went for a full skirt and blouse set as well as the underwear. And I couldn't explain it either." "What will happen to me?" I asked. "How will this change happen?" "Well," began my aunt, "it will take a long time and very gradually you will cease to be a boy or to have any male attributes and become a fully paid-up member of the female gender." An hour later, I had a better understanding of the differences between the sexes and the sort of changes that would be taking place in my body over the next few years. She managed to convince me that it was something I would enjoy and like, and when we eventually parted, me to go riding and she to her writing, I was feeling much more at ease with what lay ahead. And ahead of me lay an encounter which would not only confirm the existence of many more things in this place than I had even begun to guess, but provide an answer to the way the place always seemed to be in immaculate condition. The horse I had become accustomed to riding, a petite mare with a very gentle nature, took me into a new area of the grounds. An area that was partly covered by a wood and was rather broken country with a small lake at its center. It was here that I met with a creature who amazed and frightened me, yet would eventually be a good friend and helper. I first became aware of not being alone when my mare shied away from some bushes alongside the path. A brief struggle to regain control was soon over, and then I had time to look for the cause of her nervousness. At first I could see nothing, but I was certain I was being watched and soon focused on a patch of bush that seemed all wrong. The mare wouldn't approach it, so I dismounted and calmed her while trying to see what it was that was odd. I was still not sure what it was that I was trying to see when suddenly it was there. "Greeting, mistress to come." The figure had a voice that seemed to be between a boy's and a man's. "Please accept my apologies for startling your companion." The figure stepped into a patch of sunlight, and I found myself looking at a figure half human and more than half animal. From the waist down it was a goat, or something similar. From the waist up, it was human in form except for the short horns, which adorned its temples, and the ears, which were longer and more like an animal's than a human's. Its eyes were also those of a goat and not a human, and it was unmistakably male. "Hello," I gasped. "Who are you?" "I am the satyr Ninetale," he grinned. "At your service, mistress-to-be." "But," I thought. I hesitated, and his grin widened. "Not all are female here, mistress," he laughed. "But we cannot stay long, and we may not have concourse with any who do not invite us." "Do you help to maintain the gardens?" I asked. In truth, his very generous genitals were fascinating me and causing me to have some very strange desires. This made me rather uncomfortable and frightened. It also worried the mayor. "Yes, and other things. There are others too who keep the grounds, including our Lord Pan. This is a place of unique power, mistress. It is a place well guarded by us and by the powers of the old ones who were before and are now." He would not explain the saying, but suggested that I should return to the house and trotted beside the mare as I cantered her back toward the stables, chatting easily as we went. Just short of the stable yard, he bade me goodbye and disappeared into the shrubbery. Returning the mare to her stall and stripping her tack, I took care of watering, grooming, and then returned to the house pondering all that had happened as I walked. When I told my aunt about this meeting, she looked concerned for a moment and then agreed that the encounter had been well meant even if accidental. But she warned me to take care, adding that satyrs were not above seeking to divert or mislead if it amused them. After this I saw him at intervals. Usually he would trot beside my mare as we explored the park, and once he came to the pool and sat watching me swim with an almost wistful expression on his face. It was some 6 weeks after our first encounter that he met me and told me he had been sent to take me to learn the ways of summoning and sight. Curious, I went with him to a cave hidden among a tree-covered outcrop of huge boulders. Here I met Jacqueline, at first in the body of a lioness, but then she transformed and showed herself as a beautiful woman of indeterminate age. Her flowing robe was of rich cloth laced with gold thread and seemed to have points of light sewn into the fabric. She began my education in the art of weaving the chance to summon the other folk and to read the future, the past, and the remote in pools of water or the flames of the fire. And she taught me of the power of the old ones. As the days slid by, there was plenty to do and to learn at change. I volunteered to help with some of the indoor tasks, something which seemed to be welcomed by Aunt Colleen and the house itself. It gave me the chance to explore the house properly and to learn more about the various rooms and the people who had apparently created it. There was still plenty of time left over to spend posing for Michelle as her model and to ride, swim, and explore, and to meet more of the shy denizens of the park. Eventually, however, the summer holidays were over and I had to return to school. It was a difficult break, and I went reluctantly, knowing there was much I could never speak of and would have to conceal. There was also the little matter of the changes already underway in me. I was more than a little afraid of what might happen at school in the months ahead. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access.